Okay, now I want to discuss a game between Zeissl and Walhoffen, or Hofen, played in Vienna 1899. Zeissl had white and Walhoffen had black. So here's how the game went. First move e4, e5, and then knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, and we have a Roy Lopez or a Spanish game, which I've already discussed. Or I've discussed the basics of this opening. For example, this bishop here actually helps indirectly control the center, since this knight here is protecting the pawn. White also plans on playing c3 and then playing d4, probably castling kingside, things like that. Well, now black plays a move f5, which I haven't really discussed, or I didn't really discuss this opening, or this move by black. I did discuss backing up a move where black plays a6 and knight f, which is, a6 is the Morpheus defense, and knight to f6 is the beginning of the Berlin defense. But here black plays f5, and the idea behind this move for black is one of the goals for white is white also wants to retain this pawn here on e4. So black is tempting white to play to take the pawn to where black can seize control of the center. And what white does in response is play d4. Well, maybe I should back up a move and go, well, maybe I should say d4 is not your typical response, even though it is a very plausible response. The typical response by white when black plays f5 is to actually play knight to c3. And then typically black will capture the pawn, and then white will recapture with the knight. And then the very natural looking move in this position for black is d5, but I don't really recommend it. What you really want to play is knight to f6. If you play d5, then white usually continues by taking the pawn, and then this black pawn takes, and then the white takes the knight here. Now, of course, this black doesn't want to capture this knight, because if black captures the knight, then white will get a nice check and a fork and attack on the rook over here. So let's back up. So instead of playing knight to c3, white actually plays d4, which is somewhat of a counterattack in the, well, it is a counterattack in the center. And now black takes the e-pawn. Really what it's doing, it's capturing a pawn and forcing the knight on f3 to move. And just remember that this knight on f3 is a very good defender to the king side. So black already has this intentions of probably a king side attack, and it's trying to move this defender, this knight. So white captures a pawn in return. And now the best move for black is actually to capture this knight, because if let's say if black decides to play d4, just like I showed you in that alternative line, once again white will capture this knight here. So black is practically obligated to take this knight, and black is also taking away the knight that was defending the king side, so it gets that bonus there too. And now white will recapture the pawn. And if you look at this position, it's black to move, and I don't think really white, by playing d4, has really gained anything. Central control, probably not. It's probably better to have played the knight out originally, back on move 4 for white. So now it's black's 6th move, and this move c6 just looks almost so obvious for black, because one, it's going to force the bishop to move. Number 2, it's going to allow the queen, out on this diagonal here. So some people may say, well, maybe I should be developing my pieces, and that's good, but where you have a pawn move, which any pawn move which forces your opponent to make a move is not really a waste of time in the opening. Well, potentially not a waste of time. So now where should white move this bishop? Well, white doesn't make the best choice. The best choice for white is to actually move this bishop back to e2 for 2 reasons. If this bishop was on e2, could actually control or look at both of these diagonals, and white just gave up the knight that was defending the king side. Now this bishop can come back and help defend the king side. But white decides to play bishop to c4, where, if you look at it, it can be potentially chased away by the pawn move of d5. Now, of course, if black plays d5 immediately, white could just capture en passant. But here, black has a nice little move. Black's first going to play knight to a5 check. And the question is, how should, and with this check, black is also going to be able to win this pawn. So actually black is now going to go a pawn up. Well, I see 2 moves possible for white. I see knight c3 and bishop to d2. And it sort of depends on your strategy of what you want to do. White's going to actually play knight to c3, so let's look at knight to d2. So if white plays knight to d2, then the queen takes, and then the idea for white is to follow it up with bishop to c3, where the queen has to move again. Of course, the best looking move for black is to play queen to g5, where it protects this pawn and attacks this pawn. And white's idea, if you don't know, is to play knight to d2 in this position. So, just backing up. So white actually plays knight to c3, blocking, sort of interposing a piece and technically attacking the pawn, but it can't capture because it's pinned. And now black will just take the pawn. And now what should white do? Well, it's white's 9th move. And if you look at it, white has 2 pieces developed, but they're, not really doing anything. This potentially now black can play d5, totally shut out the bishop. And this knight doesn't really have a lot of scope. It looks like if I was white, I'd want to try to develop some pieces. Even though I have 2 pieces developed, how they're being used is not the best. And maybe I also want to, if black plays d5, I want to prevent d4. It just looks like to me, it's castling or developing this bishop. And actually, castling is a really bad mistake. So what it screamed in this position was developing the bishop. Unfortunately, I'm out of time, so I'm going to have to continue this lecture. Or actually, just this annotated game on the next video.